Do what you want to do.
Hello and welcome to the Atheist Experience. Today is Sunday, October 16th, and I am your host, Russell Glasser, and this is my co-host, Matt Dillahunty.
How you doing?
I do believe that's the first time we've ever had Beatles introducing the show.
That was
choice.
Me.
Yeah.
Thanks.
We are sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a non-profit organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. We have weekly meetings every Sunday at Crescent City Beignets at 1211 West 6th Street, a couple of blocks west of Lamar. Those start at 11:30 and they are open to any atheist or atheist-friendly people. You don't need to be a member to come. That's every Sunday except for the third Sunday of each month when we have our lecture series at the Austin History Center on 9th and Guadalupe. Those start at 12:30. Today was the third Sunday of the month, and the speaker was DJ Grothy of the Center for Inquiry, and I understand that went great, and I'm sorry I missed it, and I really wanted to go, but I couldn't. The next lecture, which I'll also have sincerest intentions of attending, it will be on November 20th, but we don't know who's talking yet. Our other regular events include Godless Gamers every Monday at 7 o'clock at my house. See the website www.atheist-community.org down on the bottom of your screen for information on how to contact me and get directions, or if you must do it now, then email tv@atheist-community.org and I will be among the people who gets that. Also, we have Atheist Happy Hour on Thursdays, 7:30 at Antonio's Tex-Mex on the southbound feeder of I-35, just south of 183. You can check the website calendar for more information on all regular and special events. In addition to this show, we also have a regular internet audio show called The Nonprofits every Saturday on freethoughtradio.com. The show is hosted by Jeff D., co-hosted by Dennis Loubet, and also features Matt Dillahunty, here pictured, and myself. The next live show will be on Saturday, October 22nd. The ACA has a board meeting on the second Sunday of every month before the regular meeting. Currently, we are meeting at Schlotsky's Deli on 218 South Lamar, south of the bridge. All ACA members are welcome to come and sit in on board meetings, but only board members may vote. The next board meeting will be on November 13th. If you enjoy the program today and you think you'd like to come and meet us, we regularly get together for dinner after the show, and right now the location of choice is Fresh Choice, located at 9761 Great Hills Trail behind the Arboretum. To get there from downtown, you go north on Research 183, just past 360, then turn left on Great Hills Trail. Fresh Choice is a great big salad bar and buffet. As with our other events, all atheists and atheist-friendly people are welcome to attend. And we'll be plugging that several more times as the show progresses. We will all be there after the show starting at around 6:45, but only if you go there today when we're taping live, which is October 16th. If today is not October 16th, then you may go there and find that there's hardly any atheists there. Okay, I have one special announcement that was handed to me at the last minute and great expense. Thursday, November 1st, our own Paul Wilson will be debating a Catholic theology student about the existence of an afterlife. The debate will start at 7:30, and you can check the ACA website, atheist-community.org, for more details, and there will be more information about exactly where to go, because I don't have that here yet. That's all for the announcements, and now I'm going to hand the floor over to Matt Dillahunty.
Thanks. And if you happen to go to the website to get information on that debate and don't see the information, check back again later, because it may have to still be added and updated with times and place and everything. So today I was going to talk a little bit about arguing for God, the existence for and against the existence, or the arguments for and against the existence of a God. And originally this was going to be kind of a fast, bulleted approach to the different arguments, the objections to the arguments, where they fail, how they appear logically, and to touch a little bit on specifically the nature of Christian apologetics and whether or not Christians should be practicing apologetics, because on the one hand, they're specifically given instructions to always be ready to defend the faith, and on the other hand, they're also instructed not to argue over controversies and genealogies about or controversies about the law or genealogies or anything. Basically, everything that ends up being in apologetics, they're not supposed to talk about, but they are. So I was going to go down that road a little bit, and I realized I wanted to keep it a little more broad-based and not focus so much on a particular religion, because somebody becomes a theist or an atheist for many different reasons, and a lot of people never actually sit down and consider why they believe what they believe, or what standards of evidence and reasoning they applied to come to the conclusion that they currently have. The first thing you have to do when you're going to argue about the existence of a God is define God, because the term is pretty much esoteric. Even among people who tend to agree, a small community, a church, a philosophical worldview, those people who agree on aspects of God, there are differences of opinion as to the scope and nature of the characteristics of God from person to person. It's very much a personal reflection, and while generally I would say that most people have some concept of God in their head, it's probably not the same for any two given people, and can be meaningless. Probably isn't the right word, but it approaches that in the sense, especially for non-believers.
Yeah, well, how many times have people called up and said, you don't believe in God, how do you define God?
Right.
And we don't, because there's so many different definitions that other people believe in that there's really no way to settle on one. We just don't really believe in any of them.
Right. Basically, anybody who's proposed a definition or explanation, description of God, I don't buy it. If you've got a specific one that you believe in and you think I should hear about it, well, feel free to call in and let me know, and I'll tell you why I do or don't believe in it. I mean, there's one position, pantheism, where God as a concept is everything, the universe, every little thing is God, and it's all, and they try to tie that to quantum string theory and whatever else, but to me, sure, I believe in that God in the sense that God is everything, because, well, I believe in everything, or the existence of everything that exists. But that is meaningless. You've redefined a concept which could have a much more specific meaning, and probably does have a much more specific meaning to a great many people. You've redefined it as something that's just, we've already got a word for it. It's kind of like the difference between philosophy and religion. If you've got some philosophy and you want to make it a religion, there's no reason to necessarily, or a religion that you want to move away from traditional religions. Playing with definitions, while you're free to do so, is probably not a good idea if you want to reach some agreement with other people in the society on what you're talking about. In the modern context, the term God is typically used to refer to a monotheistic concept of a singular supreme being. He's often, and I say he just for the sake of brevity, he's often viewed as possessing the qualities of omnipotence and omniscience, and with regard to deities like the Christian God, it includes omnibenevolence, omnipresence, and a lot of people who discuss this in order to shorten it have changed all that to just omnimax. If you're describing a God like Christians do a lot, who is supposed to be omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent, it just becomes omnimax because it's easier to do. Each of the omni words themselves present their own difficulties, which lead to potential contradictions. The actual concept of omnipotence alone can be self-contradictory. The old kind of pseudo quip about, could God make a rock so big that even he couldn't lift it? No other characteristic other than omnipotence is enters into that question, and it presents a contradiction. So a lot of apologists have taken to redefining or reinterpreting those terms to the point where omnipotence becomes as powerful as logically possible, and omniscience becomes all knowledge that can be known, which may or may not include knowledge of future events. So as we've learned more and discussed and debated the issue with various arguments, the concept of God has changed. They've had to say, okay, we can't make these gross generalizations and say that he is all-powerful. He can only be as powerful as is logically consistent. There's another kind of way out of that argument, which is the concept of a transcendental God who exists beyond space and time. It is not bound by any laws and is, can be everything and everywhere, but that also presents other problems, which I may not get into today, because we got a lot here. I'm hoping to get to some short views of arguments for and against the existence of God, but there's kind of some headway to get out of the way first, in addition to the definition of God, because you also had polytheistic religions who have several beings which are each considered to be a god. There are several theories supported by anthropological evidence and logical reasoning that the monotheistic religions of today are simply the result of polytheistic religions from the past condensed down. We're going to give all of the attributes of all of this, pantheon of gods to one god, and he becomes the one supreme being. And of course, polytheistic religions in some ways make a heck of a lot more sense than a monotheistic religion, and that's because when you have multiple deities, all of whom have different characteristics, they can be in conflict with each other. And it doesn't represent a problem. You can have different agendas between the gods and different scopes of influence between the gods, where they may overlap on some occasion, but you avoid a lot of the big contradictions. As soon as you put all of that into one being, now you have a conflicted God, which doesn't make any sense. A God who is working against himself. Even one of some of the more popular monotheistic religions aren't monotheistic really, because the notion of a good deity is often balanced by a bad deity. Christianity has Satan or the devil. Now, that's really a polytheistic religion, but to get around that, he is assigned a status of subdeity, or not as powerful as God. So the good God is all-powerful, and the bad God is not quite so all-powerful.
Right, but you can only get so far with that, because if you have one guy who's omnipotent and one guy who's not, and they're in conflict with each other, then by God, the less powerful one isn't going to be able to do anything.
Yeah, you're basically
so
saying,
if they want to blame anything on Satan, then they have to say that he's got some kind of power.
He becomes irrelevant as long as he has less power. If the good God is more powerful and could stop the lesser God, the lesser God is then irrelevant, because it makes no difference. The good God is still working against himself by allowing the bad God to continue. It's a conflict that comes up in some of these arguments later on. The other problem is that God is typically believed to possess supernatural powers, which means by definition the entire God concept or hypothesis for a lot of religions it completely transcends scientific investigation and ends up working towards circular logic, where something particularly weird happens and somebody claims that was a supernatural act of God. And if they're asked to prove it, they not only claim that it can't be proven because God is supernatural and transcends the sort of investigation we would require for proof, but the fact that it can't be proven serves as additional evidence that it was God. It happens all the time of, you can't prove that it wasn't God type of thing, and that reinforces that it was. I have in my notes, this is of course silly, but it comes up a lot. And the last thing I wanted to touch on before we get into the individual arguments is a quick note about atheism, theism, and the difference between belief and knowledge. As we've said many times on the show, theism is the belief in a god or gods. Atheism is the absence of such a belief. Atheism in its strictest sense is not the assertive belief that no God exists. There's a subtle but significant difference between saying, I don't believe in a God, and saying, I believe there is no God. The significance is that the second statement is a positive assertion, which would require evidence, usually in the form of a philosophical argument, which would attempt to prove that no God could possibly exist. And generally, we accept that that level of knowledge is, at least at this point, beyond us. In the distinction between those two sayings of I don't believe in a God and I believe there is no God is sometimes referred to as soft atheism and hard atheism. I don't find that distinction in terms particularly useful, as it tends to confuse an issue, issue further, because anybody who would qualify as hard is also a soft atheist.
Yeah.
So it's a subset. It's not two different cases.
I was going to say I don't know that many hard atheists.
I don't either.
But Christians assume that they are all of us.
While doing the research for this and looking around at some Christian apologetics sites, I found no less than 4 foolproof Christian argument against atheism, and every one of them said exactly the same thing. Atheism's claim to know that there is no God. No, we don't. At least not anybody I know. There are, I'm sure, a few who do, and there are some philosophical arguments to try and prove that no God could possibly exist. But you can't come up with a general argument against atheism and start with a premise which is completely and utterly false. At most, you could say some atheists claim, but people, like I said at the beginning, have reached their atheism or theism, their beliefs, through different means. There are a lot of people who would say that they're an atheist who've never really stopped to consider any of the arguments. To them, it just made sense. There are others who were fed up and frustrated and saw that religion was silly and not for them, and they're atheists. And there are some people who just intuit the position that there is no God, and therefore I'm an atheist. And, that's all fine, but when you're talking about what things really mean in making arguments for and against positions, that kind of general statement from a false premise is really not very helpful. Thomas Huxley in 1869 coined the term agnostic to describe individuals who are unconvinced or non-committal about the existence of deities. And Gnosticism refers to knowledge, whereas theism refers to belief. And I've always held that it's possible to be an agnostic theist, an agnostic atheist, a Gnostic theist, or a Gnostic atheist, because part of that is what you believe, and part of it is what you know. And it comes down to, I don't believe there's a God, but I don't know it for sure. Or I don't believe there's a God, and I believe that I know this for sure. Huxley and agnostics don't really like it when the word's used that way, because it pollutes the meaning that he implied, which was a non-committal position, or actually in some cases the position that the answer is unknowable. And something that it may cheapen their position. Personally, I find that most of the people who claim to be agnostic, at least most of the ones I've met, are actually atheists. They're just uncomfortable with either the word atheist or confused about the actual meaning, because they hear, for instance, arguments from Christians or whatever. Atheists say there is no God, and somebody who doesn't believe in a God says, "Whoa, I don't know that, so I guess I'll be an agnostic." The fact of the matter is, if you do not believe in a God, you're an atheist. You don't have to say so, but it's true. So throughout history, there have been a number of arguments in an attempt to prove that, through logic and reason, that there is a God. I'm going to start with one that Russell and I got hit with on the show a while back, and we completely screwed it up because we confused which argument it was about. And it's the ontological argument, which was the product of St. Anselm. And it's based on the concept of a being greater than any other being could possibly be. On some level, this ends up boiling down to God exists because I can imagine it. But that's not really fair to the argument. It can be. A short general version of the ontological argument goes, God is the greatest possible being and thus possesses all perfections. Existence is a perfection. Therefore, God exists, because we've defined him to be perfect. And perfect, therefore, includes existence, so it must happen. There's a longer version of the argument where God is an entity greater than any other. The concept of God exists in human understanding. And then the third premise is that God does not exist in reality, and that only exists so that it can be refuted.
So this is an argument by contradiction.
Yes.
Argument from absurdity.
Right. The concept of God existing in reality exists in the human understanding as well. If an entity exists in reality and in human understanding, if it exists in my head and for real, that would be greater than the one that just exists in my head. And since we already defined the one that exists just in my head as greater than anything else, then it can't be true that it exists only in my head. It must also exist in reality. It's confusing if you're not reading it, and I didn't try to convolute this on purpose. It's when it was originally
Well, to be fair,
created.
you have to go for that kind of weird stretch if you want to claim that you're logically proving the existence of God.
Right.
It's like this annoying guy in high school who always used to come up to me and tell me he could prove that 1 equals 0. You know?
Yeah.
He came up with all these things where the divide by 0 was cleverly hidden deep inside one of the terms.
Yeah. You see a lot of things like
The
that.
more confusing something is, the easier it is for some people to not look
to
for
not see
where
the flaw in it.
contradictions are.
If I tell you that apples are blue, and the sky is, mirrored, there's obvious things in there for you to see. But if I do some, tap dancing to hide it, and a lot of people have accused the ontological argument of being that kind of tap dance, both in the sense that first, it doesn't refer to a specific God. It refers to a concept of God which is defined as every possible perfection, which could be the equivalent of pantheism. As soon as you include every possible perfection, you may have specifically included everything in the universe, everything that exists or could exist. So there's an element of that. There's another argument that existence is not a property. This was first found in Gassendi's objections to Descartes' meditations, because this wasn't originally supposed to be a logical argument. It was just supposed to be a meditation, something for you to sit and ponder about the existence of God. And later this was also modified by Kant. Existence is not a perfection. It's not a property. Perfection is something, existence is binary. It's something either exists or it doesn't. Perfection is a scale where you have degrees of proceeding towards perfection. And the argument is that anything which has the property of being non-existent could not possibly have any other properties because it doesn't exist. So it's the ontological argument includes, on some levels, definition manipulation, switching the text of we have one concept of God, which is kind of subtly substituted for another context later on. My favorite, though, is Douglas Gaskins did an argument in the style of the ontological argument to show, using the exact same methods, that God doesn't exist. And that is, and it's actually simpler and easier to understand. The creation of everything in existence, we're going to, as our initial premise, we're going to say that the creation of everything is the most marvelous achievement imaginable. I can buy that.
Okay.
The merit of a given achievement is the product of A, its intrinsic quality, and B, the ability of its creator. The greater the disability or handicap of a creator, the more impressive the achievement. For a 3-year-old to paint something that looks like a Rembrandt, that's a significant achievement. For a one-legged man to run the quarter mile in 3 seconds or so is absurd. But as the disability increases, the impressiveness of the creation increases. The most formidable handicap for a creator would be non-existence. Therefore, if we suppose that the universe is the product of an existent creator, we can conceive of a greater being, namely one who created everything without ever existing in the first place. Therefore, God does not exist.
I like Jeff D's comment on this argument that it's kind of silly to say that perfect things have to have every good quality. I mean, by that logic, God should be an excellent floor polish. And,
yes.
And putting him on your ribs should make them taste extra delicious.
Oh, man. There's a kind of a similar argument to the ontological argument. It's been deemed the mathematical argument, and it's just about as absurd and isn't in any... I have never seen this in any strict logical form of premise and conclusion, but it defines God as the absolute infinite, a mathematical concept which exists in our head. I mean, you couldn't count to infinity, but we have a concept of infinity, and therefore, because we have this concept of infinity, it must exist somewhere as part of a set. And therefore, somebody has gone ahead and decided to define God as that concept.
Well, I mean, I can imagine a whole lot of things.
Yeah. I have a concept of unicorns. That doesn't mean they exist.
Right, we're all big Joss Whedon fans, and clearly he, came up with vampire slayers and spaceships and alien races that go around eating people.
Yeah.
And those are cool concepts, but they don't exist.
I've seen representations of them, and I know they don't exist. One of the next arguments for the existence of God is the cosmological argument, which argues it's often called just the first cause argument, and it starts with everything has to have a cause, nothing can cause itself, everything is caused by some other thing. A causal chain cannot be of infinite length, so there must have been a first cause, and God is that first cause. Excuse me. The problems with this are in almost every single line. First of all, the initial premise that everything has to have a cause is not necessarily a true premise, and is contradicted by the conclusion. If you want to say God was the first cause, what caused God? You've contradicted your premise as soon as you're done. The next objection is that a causal chain cannot be of infinite length. That's not demonstrably true. There could be an infinite chain. There are theories that would place the universe as having no beginning, as having an infinite chain, or at least from the perspective of our view.
Or the universe we perceive right now had a beginning, which was the Big Bang, but that Big Bang could have been one of a series of bangs and collapses,
right,
or one among multiple Big Bangs in various places throughout some other universe or something.
Yeah, part of the problem with is
but
with our perception.
Damned if we know.
Yeah, it's part of it's our perception. I mean, in reality, we only live for a short period of time. You're extremely lucky if you get 80 good years in, and rare to go over a century. So, and our memories are, and our understanding have this sharp fall off towards the future and the past of how well we can grasp things. And when you start talking about periods of time in the millions or billions of years, and that's, you're talking about our universe is, 11 billion years old, roughly, best guess. It's possible that there could have been, let's say, 11 billion of those 11 billion periods or more. And it's possible that it could be infinite. And we have no real way to grasp the concept of infinity, backwards or forwards, apart from just the surface realization that, whatever number you can think of, add one more and add one more and add one more. It's kind of absurd to make a claim like in the cosmological argument and just because everything has a cause. Well, maybe not. A causal chain can't be infinite length. Well, maybe not. But then there's also this leap to, even if it was all true and we define that there must be an uncaused first cause, the final statement that God was the first cause is just a complete out of left field non sequitur. It doesn't, you just inserted God. There's no reason not to presume that, for instance, the universe itself was the cause. And the other thing is that this doesn't define any specific God other than it just defines a cause. Doesn't have any characteristics attributed to the God, such as self-awareness or will or anything. So throwing the word God in there just doesn't fit. Even if you believed that it proved a first cause, it could be the Big Bang. It could be anything.
Or it could be that there was a very teeny subatomic particle that was very boring and had no special properties and just, fired off in a direction for no particular reason, and that was the first cause.
Right.
Nobody would be very impressed if that was your God.
Yeah, and even if all of this were to prove that there was a first cause and that first cause was God, which it doesn't do anything to say that God survived that first cause. Maybe there was a God, a creator God, a first cause God, who blew out the entire universe and then ceased to exist. That's consistent with that argument. So what some people end up doing is jumping on these arguments and saying, well, I believe in the words of Jesus, and here's an argument that proves God. Well, okay, it doesn't actually, but even if it did, it doesn't prove your God. Like I chimed out earlier with the pantheistic arguments towards God being everything, and that tends to fit many more of these philosophical arguments. Which one we got next? The teleological arguments. So this is actually a series of arguments.
Real quick, though,
Sure.
since it's 5 o'clock, I'd just like to remind everybody that this is a live call-in show, and the number just disappeared from the bottom of the screen, but it was there up until a second ago. We got one caller on the line, and you guys can go ahead and line up if you're interested in telling Matt that he's all wrong or whatever.
Not possible. Okay, it is possible.
Yes, because you are omnipotent after all.
Yeah, I am God. I'm all the proof you need. Now, the next one that I was going to go over real quick was the teleological argument, or it's actually a series of arguments that stems from a perception of order, purpose, or design within the universe. This is where a lot of the intelligent design arguments come from. This is Michael Behe's Ballywick, this argument that of irreducible complexity within his particular argument. And the core of it is that something, whether it be a human being or the cosmos itself, is too complex to have occurred randomly or naturally. Therefore, it must have been created by an intelligent being. God is that intelligent being, therefore God exists. Wow. It's kind of hard to figure out where to start on some of these. In some aspects, this is kind of an argument from ignorance, in that we don't know something, so we've decided to plug God into that gap. Or we perceive a design or a purpose, and therefore immediately assume that our perception of this design or purpose is correct. Paley had the watchmaker analogy of walking along the beach and finding a pocket watch and realizing this thing was designed and must have had a designer. Michael B. took that to claims that half of an eye couldn't evolve because half of an eye would be useless and wouldn't encourage the evolution of other things. And some of these are playing with definitions, and others rely on a misunderstanding or misinterpretation of evolution. Evolution doesn't happen with a purpose in mind. There's no end goal. There's no, blind newt who says, I'm going to start working on evolving eyes for my future generations. It just doesn't happen that way. And this concept of half an eye being useless is kind of trickery, because when we talk about half of an eye or fractions of an eye, for example, we're not talking about a lens, a retina, an optic nerve as individual pieces and somehow they fit together. The process from no vision to color vision starts at no light sensitivity at all. then cells, or a cell or groups of cells, which are light sensitive, sense the presence of light and signal to the brain. We, with our creatures that have that.
Assuming you have a brain.
Yeah.
Some plants just tip toward the light.
Yeah. Then development of multi-coordinated cells, development of a lens to focus the light, development of brain-enabling processes to interpret and interpret what it receives and control the muscles of the eye, etc. And when you explain that, this process of getting from no visible or no visual perception to color vision, that kind of clears up this whole half an eye wouldn't work, because following that line, half an eye does work, and there are examples of this, but we only see part of the spectrum anyway. We have an inherent anthropic bias towards humans as some pinnacle of evolution, or pinnacle of the entire process.
Yeah, I don't know what they're thinking when they talk about half an eye. Maybe they imagine an eye being chopped neatly down the middle, and you have, half an eye coming out of your socket. But I mean, I can give an example of something less than a complete eye still being useful, and the example is I wear contact lenses. Most people have built-in lenses in their eyes which work well to focus light and allow them to discern objects very precisely at a long distance. If I'm without my contact lenses, I'm legally blind for the purposes of driving a car. So I wouldn't be allowed to drive without my contact lenses, and I can't read anything that's right in front of my face. But if we were living in if we weren't living in our complicated modern society and I didn't have any contact lenses, I could still see well enough to jump out of the way of something that was going to fall on me, or run when something appears to be getting larger and larger in my direction. And that's way better than not having an eye at all. And there's all kinds of other things you can play around with, like how your eye is curved, how much light you pull in, how many different photoreceptors you have, all sorts of things. There's lots of room to play with having less than a complete eye.
And there's also the idea, I was talking about how we have this human-centered bias. We consider vision our little limited spectrum of visible light that we can see, but the actual spectrum, the actual spectrum is much broader. And there are, for instance, bats use sonar. It's a different way of seeing. It's counterintuitive to us because we can't do it. But there may be significant advantages to that, even over the vision that we have. So it's possible that from a bat's perspective, we might have half an eye. You can't start with humans as the end-all be-all, because you're automatically assuming a purpose in the process of evolution, and these designs or these arguments of I see design, I look around the world and I see design, they all start with the false assumption from human perspective that there would be a design, that there exists. If you come across a Mayan temple as you're walking through the jungle and you've never seen one before, you're going to look at it and know that it's designed, but why? It's not because you have any perception of expectation of there being a temple there or being a design. You look at it and you recognize components of design, and the element that is consistent across the board is something which we recognize as designed is something which does not occur naturally. This is something that we do not know has occurred naturally. If I find a watch or a cell phone or a temple, I have no reason to believe that these things occur naturally. I don't know of any temples or cell phones that grow out of the ground. I do know of temples being built. I do know of cell phones being designed and manufactured.
Right, and we have very good proof that there are people who are able to do those things.
Right. It's, when it comes to looking at humans or a tree, if you look at humans or a tree or whatever and you see design, I'm sorry, but you're seeing it because you want to. We do know that humans and trees occur naturally. We know this not just through the theory of evolution, but also through the theory of sexual reproduction, which we've demonstrated. But it's just a theory, so we might not trust it too much. That's my little dig at the creationists. With
any dig at creationists is all right with me. Do you want to take a couple of callers?
Let me get through this one little section as an overview real quick, and we can take callers, and then I'll come back and look at arguments against the existence of God. There's another type of, or another category of arguments for the existence of God, which basically come down to personal experience, I believe the Bible is reliable. I believe that the account of some Holy Scripture is accurate. I know people have claimed to have near-death experiences. Morality cannot exist if there is no God. We have witnesses or people who've claimed to be witnesses, and I consider that testimony reliable, and all of those end up being the basis of what turns out to be a very personal argument for the existence of God, but it's not very convincing when you're trying to relay that information to somebody who doesn't already believe. It doesn't meet the standards of evidence that many people would require before believing in something exceptional. And one of the most common of those is the majority argument, which is all throughout history in all places, people have had a God belief, and therefore there must be a God. Well, first of all, it's not true. We know of at least one tribe that doesn't have a God belief. But when civilization springs up, and it's the process of a God hypothesis is something which sociologically may be completely natural. When the lightning streaks across the sky, you wonder why, and if you don't have an answer, it's Zeus. When you find gaps, sometimes it's more comforting to fill them than to be constantly nagged by something you don't know. I mean, we all would like to know the answers to a great many things. The difference is that I personally would prefer to know that the answers that I do have are as right as they possibly can be. And why don't we get some calls, and I'll come back and touch on the flip side of this.
Okay. It looks like line 1 had been on for a while, just maybe disappeared. So I'm going to go, I'm not sure who's on line 1 now, but I'm going to go with Chris for now and wait for an update from the studio. Chris?
Hey, how you guys?
How are you?
Pretty good. How you doing?
Fine.
Good.
Hey, it's just really lucky, but I was talking earlier to your screener or whoever. It's not a big mythic unicorn type world. I mean, it's just all chemistry. We were lucky to be some kind of an amoebic acid that turned into humans. And our heads and brains and everything like that are just a fluke of luck, that we're able to express our opinions. And if you want to choose religion, that's fine. If you want to choose whatever, it's just great. But I do believe that like as far as God and everything else, that's pretty much in between the ears.
Yeah, it's well, one interesting thing which I don't have here, at least I don't think, there's with regard to the teleological argument or the anthropic portion of that, is that last year Stephen Hawking released his initial calculations or whatever that show that there's a 98% chance that a universe of a type such as ours, with the same type of requirements for life, 98% chance that it would be the result of a Big Bang. And a lot of people who make the arguments, the teleological brand of arguments, who claim that, oh my gosh, it's just so incredibly unlikely that this particular universe would ever exist to support life. I mean, if just one little thing was wrong, we wouldn't even exist. There has to be a God to fine-tune it. That's just, you just don't understand statistics, because the chance of that universe existing is 100%. It exists. We're here.
Well,
it happened. It doesn't matter how unlikely it was that it could have happened. It happened.
It did. And
Well,
we're here.
we are pretty
Yeah.
lucky, but on the other hand, if we weren't lucky, we wouldn't know it.
Yeah.
And it
there
actually
you go
reminds
there.
me. It reminds me of a Bloom County cartoon that I had on my dorm door a long time ago, where Opus the penguin had dropped some ice cream on his toes, and he said, "Oh, I'm so blasted unlucky." And then the little nerd kid comes up to him and says, "You know, statistically speaking, the chances of a universe like ours forming are 1 in blah blah blah, and the chances of penguins evolving are blah blah blah, and the chances of your particular parents meeting are blah blah blah. So you're
Yeah.
incredibly lucky to be standing there with ice cream on your toes."
Well, you could have a new life form between those toes.
Yeah.
And
Maybe something that lived
that's
off of
not
ice
very
cream
likely.
just got really lucky.
Yeah, and I, you know, I enjoy your guys' show, by the way.
Thanks.
And you know, it does offer the you know, alternative as opposed to, you know, group-based religions and all that.
Yeah.
And
With a bunch of, you know, I don't know how many, there's an entire network devoted to religious shows just here in town, and I don't know how many others bleed off onto the other channels.
You know,
so.
all the ones I don't watch.
Well, you and I are not watching the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Okay. Thanks for
you guys
calling.
have a good day. Okay.
Thanks a
All right,
lot.
you too.
All right. Bye.
I've gotten no change on the screen, so it still says that Gary is on line 1, and I'm guessing he's not. But hello, is this Gary? Say hi if you think that I'm on your line.
Hi.
Hi. That was
Hi.
you.
Who's
This
this?
is Eric.
Hi, Eric.
How y'all doing today? I was just calling. I don't want to like come off like I'm gonna get in a fight or anything, because I appreciate y'all's guys' show, but I just had a question. I'm pretty sure y'all answered it before. What is y'all's beliefs, or if one of y'all want to speak for it, on the Bible? Of like, is it just something that someone in Israel they wrote it and then it just tagged on from there, or how do y'all see that, or how do y'all see the Bible? Just a book, just another book, or?
Basically, yeah, it's not something someone wrote. It's something a bunch of someones wrote. I mean, you know, people a long time ago had a long tradition of oral history, and when they finally got around to inventing writing, they decided some of it would be good to jot down. And actually, multiple versions of various stories made it into the Bible because they didn't want to exclude people. Like, there are actually Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 tell completely different stories of creation, although they more or less, you know, end up in the same place. They have different orders of things, and so.
Yeah.
You know, basically, it's a collection of myths, and as such, it's historically interesting, but it doesn't necessarily tell us anything useful about the universe.
My position, you know, I was a fundamentalist Christian, a Southern Baptist for 20, 25 years or more. And while I don't know how much of the Bible I actually believed literally, I think I was maybe always a little careful about some of the literal beliefs. My view on the Bible now is, and after having done a lot of research, because I was thinking about going to seminary, is that it is primarily a collection of myths, fables, a little bit of Jewish history, and there's nothing in there which definitively would prove the existence of a God or the reliability of a religion. It's self-contradictory between passages and books. Sometimes it contradicts itself in the span of 2 verses. One of my favorites is Proverbs. Where is it? 14. Is it 14? No, Proverbs 26. Verse 4 and 5. Verse 4 says, "Do not answer a fool according to his folly, or you will be like him yourself." And verse 5 says, "Answer a fool according to his folly, or he'll be wise in his own eyes." It's.
You mean like it's saying? What do you mean in that? Like, how are you? Like, what are you reading out of that? Like what do you mean by that?
One verse is saying, "Don't answer somebody who's being foolish."
Okay.
And the other one, the very next verse, specifically tells you to answer them. Basically, it's about arguing with people.
Okay.
And that's why I had this, is because in 1 Peter 3:15, Christians are generally instructed to always be ready to make a defense to everyone who asks and give an account for the hope that is in you with regard to the Christian religion. But Paul also says in Titus 3:9 through 11 to avoid foolish controversies and genealogies and arguments. And, there's a part in the Bible where the fool says in his heart that there is no God, and it goes on in Proverbs to talk about how to deal with fools and how to deal with who you should and shouldn't argue with. My take on the whole thing is that there are contradictions, there are problems, there are X-rated portions of the Bible. There are things that would get me thrown off television if I grabbed my Bible right now and read it word for word. To me, that's not the basis of a religion. I have no problem with some of the things that, for instance, Jesus is supposed to have said, whether or not he said them, whether or not he existed. There are some things in there. You'll love thy neighbor and do good works. And then there's also some incredibly foolish things in there about take no thought for tomorrow, don't save, don't work, don't, just wander and preach. But also pray in your closet. Don't pray in public. It's one big book of contradictions and multiple choice, and pick which passage best defines what you want to say and use that.
Another question. I don't mean to take y'all's time or whatever.
Sure.
I remember we were watching. I don't know if it was live. I doubt it. I think it was a recording about church and state. It was you. I don't know your name. I'm sorry.
Which one?
There's two of us.
Me or him?
Yeah, the other one. The one you're pointing at.
You.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm Matt.
He said that about Abraham Lincoln and how he was kind of forced into reading what he was supposed to say.
Right. That was either the Thanksgiving Day Proclamation or the National Day of Prayer Proclamation.
Yeah,
it was ordered by the Senate.
On that, I'm sorry, I don't mean to.
No, go ahead.
On that, would you say that the people who made the Constitution or the Independence, whatever, would have put the right and wrong from the Bible, like what is right and what is wrong, or what do you know what I'm kind of saying?
Some of them believed in the Bible, and some of them not so much.
Okay.
The Founding Fathers covered a broad range. There were a lot that came from biblical religions and branches of biblical religions. So, a lot of them, I think their morality might have come from that. But there were also deists, and the founding of the government was a result of people listening to and following German freethinkers and people like Thomas Paine, who realized the importance of a secular government, that it's okay for you to be religious and have your religion, but that when we start mixing religion and government, we're always going to do wrong by somebody, and we may end up doing wrong by everybody. Because we risk showing favoritism towards one or the other. I have no problem with somebody who's religious or Christian or has a belief. The problem that I have, and one of the reasons that I'm such a proponent of trying to educate people on misperceptions, is, first of all, I hate it when they lie about it. When they make the claim that just because this nation is primarily Christian now, that is in fact a Christian nation, and twist that to mean that it was founded on Christianity and is reliant upon Christian principles, because it's just not true. In addition to having problems with when they lie, I have a problem with when any group, regardless of what you believe, attempts to legislate your opinion as law to be enforced on everybody else, regardless of what they believe. If it's not something that's in the interest of in national security or health and welfare or something like that, that's has a secular purpose that is noted as good. If you just think homosexuality is bad because God tells you that you need to be killing them, and you go out and support and work towards a law that would make homosexuality illegal, I have a problem with that. And not that it matters. I'm not homosexual. I just happen to realize that the rights and freedoms that exist in this country that we enjoy are in danger of being limited by bigots and people who live in this superstitious world of ignorance, where they'll because somebody has said something from the pulpit, or somebody in a position of authority, whether it be a mom and dad or whoever, has taught this bigotry or misinformation and pushed it into their head, that they're going to believe it, and they're going to believe it forever because
I
they
mean,
don't challenge.
What I say is that religion absolutely by no means does it make you a bigot, because
Right.
there are lots of intelligent, tolerant, open-minded religious people out there. But what religion does do is, if you happen to be a bigot anyway, then religion tells you, reinforces your belief that what you happen to believe is absolutely right, and it's okay to go out and conquer people for it, because there's a superhero in the sky who can do anything and is the final standard on everything, and he happens to agree with everything you believe.
Okay.
I think we're going to have to move on, though.
Okay.
Thanks a lot for calling.
Thank you.
I can pretty much tell already that I'm not actually going to get to go through
Sorry.
the counter arguments. No, that's fine. I would prefer to take callers anyway. I do want to say this, and if we have to come back to it, we can. Like the arguments for the existence of a God tend to suffer from logical flaws, where many of them are logically valid arguments. They're just unsound because either the premise is unsound or the conclusion is the result of a non sequitur or circular reasoning or any other fallacy. The arguments for the non-existence of God, which can take the form of, there's an argument with regard to inconsistent revelation, which says that you've got all these religions and holy scriptures, and they're all revealed something different. They can't all be correct. They are all wrong, or it's most likely that they're all wrong to some degree, which means it's very likely that they're all wrong completely. There's the problem of evil, which discounts the concept of a God who is omnipotent, omnibenevolent, and omniscient. There's atheist existential arguments. There's the argument for no reason, that a perfect being wouldn't actually have any reason to do anything. If you're perfect, you don't need anything. You have no desire, no reason for action. All of the arguments against the existence of God that I found and looked up, they're valid and sound, but they're limited in that they only disprove the existence of a specifically defined God. The God who's omnibenevolent, omnipotent, and omniscient. The God with all three of those characters can't possibly exist if the universe contains evil. And while we can't prove that there's no God, and such a proof might in fact be impossible, these arguments show that the religious depiction of God, none of them have it right. And as we begin to chip away at what God can and can't be, based on the arguments for the non-existence of God, what kind of God is left? What we end up with is a God which is far less than any religion is claiming, doesn't have that omni-max characteristic, even in their more limited sense of all-powerful, has all the power that can be attained. Looking at it, you end up with a God that is either irrelevant, a monotheistic God who no longer exists, stopped after creation, doesn't care to make his presence unambiguous, is irrelevant or undefined or non-existent, which none of those descriptions really match any religion I've ever heard of. I don't hear anybody preaching about their Savior who is irrelevant.
We need more deists.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if we have to have people telling us that there's a God, they might as well be deists.
Now, one of my roommates is a deist, so I completely understand the concept. And the thing is that deism is consistent with the first cause argument, where God not only started the universe, but he may have ceased to exist at that point. That's still consistent with deism. The final note that I'd written up after going through this was that we shouldn't be encouraging faith. We shouldn't be taking a step backward toward the days when the world was ruled by ignorance, religious edict, and superstition. The God concept and the religious trappings like creationism and the efficacy of prayer are just as unproven, unrealistic, and unreliable as feng shui, astrology, palm reading, magnet therapy, and talking to the dead. You can't have, well, you can, you shouldn't have a separate set of evidentiary rules to cover your concept of God than you do for anything else. If I tell you I have a pet dragon and you say that's nonsense because I can't prove it, you shouldn't then be able to come back and say that you have a God but you can't prove it and it's still not nonsense. You have to have higher standards for that when you're talking about, actually making an argument. If you choose to believe it despite the evidence to the contrary, or in the face of little evidence to support it, that's fine. It's your personal decision. But when you start pushing that belief on others, you need to have some kind of reasonable, rational explanation if you plan to be convincing at all.
Yeah, and I think that in reality, skepticism is the norm of the way people act rather than the exception. Because, if you receive an email that says, "Hello, I am an obscure businessman living in Nigeria, and I think that you should send me your bank account information so I can deposit $10 million. A few people actually fall for that, believe it or not, but most of us don't, I hope. And all I'm saying is it's healthy to be skeptical, and it's usually not healthy to suspend your skepticism and say, okay, this thing I'll just believe because it's a nice thing to believe, and believing in it will make me happy, because it might turn out that it doesn't.
Yeah, which is more likely, that there's somebody who wants to give you $10 million, or somebody who created you, died on the cross for you and wants to give you eternal life? I mean, at least the guy who claims that he wants to give me $10 million, I know exactly what $10 million, is conceptually. I know that somewhere $10 million exists. I have evidence that shows that the guy who wrote to tell me he wants to give me $10 million, I have evidence that he exists in this writing,
Somebody
and
must have sent
I can find out who he is. So there's far more convincing evidence to support the idea that somebody wants to give me $10 million. So why is it far easier for people to believe that there's a creator God who loves you and wants you to hang out and play a harp forever, yet they're instantly skeptical of the guy who wants to give them $10 million?
Okay, just a reminder, this is a live call-in show, although we've taken few calls today. The date today is October 16th, 2005, and that's important because if you don't see the date and a phone number on your screen right now, then you are watching a rerun either on Sunday or Tuesday. But if you are watching, then call that number down at the bottom of your screen. And also, if today is the right day, come meet us at Fresh Choice if you are an atheist or atheist-friendly person. The address is 9761 Great Hills Trail. It's north of the Arboretum, and we'll be there after the show at about 6:45, just like it says down there. Okay, next caller will be Jason. Hi, we've been waiting for a long time.
Yeah, what's going on, man?
Not much.
Oh, yeah, the question I had was about, well, a lot of these different religions are in place. There are a whole lot of different religions. Eventually, you guys, it seemed like to me, would become sort of a religion, because I know you're getting a lot of callers that seem to be a lot younger and confused, and they're calling actually looking for a lot of answers. And then, I guess you guys do provide answers, in your own perspective. But I'm a Christian.
I like to think that we don't so much provide answers as offer a framework for thinking about things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't really want anybody. I know how reliable what I'm saying is to me. My point isn't when I'm on here to say, believe me, I'm right. I'd much rather have them go look up the information themselves to investigate it and think about it. Go actually look up the arguments for and against the existence of God and see which one makes the most sense. Actually, if you're
5 years, 10 years down the line, where do you guys see yourself at? I know you see yourselves, maybe I would say converting, because basically a lot of people are tuning in, a lot of people are confused, a lot of people know that the religion that they're with it due to solely to the fact that their parents and their parents' parents were in this religion, and there are a lot of people out there that are atheists. And what do you see guys in 10 years, 5 years from now?
Well, nothing would make me happier than if there were more atheists in the world. But I don't see that as a mission, really. I'll tell you what I do see as a good thing to work toward. I'm a member of a message board, and there's a guy who's been arguing with me for months about creationism and the existence of God and that sort of thing.
Of course.
Basically, didn't understand anything about atheism and made some really ridiculous arguments at first. And his arguing has grown more sophisticated as I've known him. And the other day, I saw a post by him that said, "I thought you should know that somebody in my church said that you have to have God to be moral." And I said, "What makes you think that atheists aren't moral?" And before I knew you, I would never have stood up for someone like you.
Exactly. I understand. Well, I guess you guys answered my question pretty good. I just see you guys, in 5-10 years. I mean, if you're, going strong like you are now, I see you guys maybe converting a lot of people. I see you guys maybe getting the nation. Maybe. I mean, I don't even see that as impossible. I mean,
the point for me at least is not to necessarily convert people away from their religion to an atheist worldview. It's, you're free to keep your religion. My position is primarily with regard to separation of church and state and to promote knowledge, understanding, and good education, because we have incredibly crappy education in this country with regard to public schools. And I'm not just talking about letting intelligent design sneak in, creationism in the lab coat.
We are talking about that too.
That's one of my big issues. But how many people in public schools, all the way from kindergarten through grade 12, if they happen to make it that far and don't, get pregnant or gonorrhea or drop out or whatever, how many people are actually taught critical thinking skills? How many people are taught what the scientific method actually is? There's, the entire purview of epistemology, where you're trying to figure out what you know and how you know it, and what ways there are to know things. And while, if I had a religion from any standpoint, if I were to say X is my religion, it wouldn't be atheism, it would be science. And not because, not with anything regarding a supreme being or anything. Atheism is my position on that question. But as far as worshiping and revering, science is it, because it is, without question, the most reliable method we have currently for knowing the truth from fiction.
I wouldn't go so far as to say worship and revere, personally.
Well, in a poetic sense. I'm not going to be on my knees in front of,
Well, you guys do a good job, man. I'm just calling, a lot of people, out here are, joining different groups and things like that. And I can just see your group as one of those that a lot of people, you guys got a website, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, atheist-community.org. Plug.
You guys get hit on that a lot, then, I bet. You got a lot of hits on that, right?
Significant.
I actually have no idea how much traffic the website gets.
I've seen the stats before, and they were okay.
Hey, that's decent, man. I was just calling in.
Okay.
It seems like you guys get pretty powerful over the years, but thanks a lot, man.
Thanks.
Bye.
And I wonder if he was driving at something like atheists are taking over the country, or
it wouldn't bother me. Any amount, the more we can get this country back to its secular roots, the happier I'll be.
But they're not.
We are increasing. In the last 10 years, we've gone from 8% to 14.5%.
One other thing I will add is that personally, I value the ability to think about stuff as more important than actually being an atheist. I feel that being an atheist tends to come out of the first thing. But I would rather hang out with an unusually smart and intelligent and thoughtful Christian than an unusually boorish and not too bright atheist. So it's not atheism that is really the most important thing to me, even though this is in fact the atheist experience.
Yeah. The only thing about atheism that I really push towards is this elimination of the stigma of the name.
Right.
People don't want to identify themselves as being an atheist, and for me, as somebody who was a Christian for many years, boy, it took a lot of work for me to say, yeah, I'm an atheist. But because there's this complete misperception when it's talked about, so it's good for us to put a positive face on atheism, hopefully, and to not only be representatives of the title, but to show people that, you know, it's not a dirty word, and secular people aren't evil, and atheists aren't immoral. And there's no tie there.
Yeah. Moving on, our next caller is Marci.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
Okay, I was just wondering what an atheistic views were on spirituality, and by spirituality I mean based on like actual religious teachings and not organized religion by what like a priest or monk would tell you.
What are
the actual teachings of
What are
religion.
actual religious teachings?
Well, you know, like in Buddhism, and Buddhism is something that can get, like, people call it atheist sometimes, I've heard. I don't know how often it's been called that, but just because they don't believe in a God, they just are, it's more of a way of life. And so I'm just wondering, like, are y'all completely against spirituality in general, or is it just like, I mean, I don't know, I guess, what are your views on
There
spirituality?
wouldn't be an official atheist position, obviously, since Buddhists are mostly atheists. Atheism only goes to the question of whether or not you believe in the existence of a God. Anything supernatural, ghosts, spirits, reincarnation, magnet therapy, everything else, all of those beliefs are transcend the actual atheist question. So you could be an atheist and be either way on the existence of ghosts. Me personally, I go beyond just atheism.
Yeah, well, I mean, for me personally, it really depends on what you mean by spirituality, because, I mean, spirituality is a weird word to begin with because it has its basis in spirit, which kind of assumes something supernatural. But when a lot of people talk about spirituality, they mean something like, you know, I like to meditate to get my head in order, and, you know, that's good. I mean, getting your head in order is a great thing, and finding different ways to think about things is good. You know, if you like to stand on a cliff at sunset and watch the sun go down over the ocean, I think that's terrific. The sun looks really beautiful, and it gives you perspective on, wow, here's our universe that's been here for billions of years. So, again, it really depends, because I'm not against spirituality, but if spirituality means supernatural stuff, I don't particularly believe in it. But then again, I'm not against people believing it. I'm not against anything people believe unless it affects me directly.
Yeah, or harms others, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you guys, and I just want to let you know I have a World Religions test Tuesday, and y'all finally got me able to study.
Yay!
So thanks, y'all have a good night.
You're welcome.
I hope you ace it.
Okay, bye.
Thanks for calling.
See ya. Moving on, we have one caller on the line and other open lines, and the number is down there on the bottom of your screen if and only if today is the day of a live show. If not, you're watching a rerun, and we're moving on to Jeff.
Hey, what's up, guys?
Hey, Jeff.
Hey.
Hey, I've been watching the show, and the segment on, you know, the cosmological, mathematical, ontological arguments, things like that. I think it's really interesting when some of the major religions like Christianity and Islam try to use these arguments as a defense for their God, mostly because, just to me, when I hear them, of course, you know, they're flawed, as y'all pointed out, and there's also such a huge gap between, say, you know, that God must have been around because he was the first cause, to making a jump to that he sustains, you know, say, this kingdom of heaven that takes in souls and, you know, judges mankind and sends himself through a human vessel to the earth. And it seems like even if one of these arguments that succeed for one of these major religions, it makes absolutely no comment on all these specifics of the religion, and it just seems completely weak, and I just want to see what you guys have to say about that.
Yeah, actually, I kind of had started to touch on that earlier.
Sorry for hurrying you.
No. I thought I hit it, but I probably didn't get it. You know, I agree with what you're saying. You know, just because one of these arguments, if it were valid, which most of them, you know, have problems, it still doesn't prove, you know, Jesus or Buddha or Muhammad or any other religious claim. One of the things that you know, and this kind of relates to answering the last caller's question as well, with regard to my position on supernatural beliefs. I pretty much evaluate my position on each question and each claim independently, and often. I'm prone to reconsidering my position on certain things. Somebody makes a claim about something. Now, there are some things which I've considered in depth, and I'm unlikely to change my mind unless somebody presents extremely compelling evidence. So I don't have any beliefs in supernatural per se, because there's not evidence to show that exists. And much the same as what you're talking about, even if one of these arguments were valid, it doesn't speak to the individual claims. And Thomas Jefferson took the New Testament and redacted it to remove all of the supernatural bits, the virgin birth, the resurrection, the walking on water, the loaves and the fishes, removing all of these supernatural elements, so that he had a New Testament which consisted just of a biography and list of sayings attributed to Jesus. That's the type of critical thinking that I think anybody should exercise, and say, you know what, I'll put the loaves and fishes back in as soon as you actually show evidence. And I'll put the walking on water back in as soon as it becomes reasonable. And I'll put the resurrections from the dead back in as soon as we get, any example of that happening without, the paddles.
It's really interesting. I didn't know that Thomas Jefferson had...
You can look it up online. It's called the Jefferson Bible.
It starts with...
I just want to say this is the first day I've seen this show, and it's cool to know that it's out there. So
great. Thanks for watching.
Thanks
Let your friends know, and we've got the after dinner stuff.
Right. Yes. Remind you that we'll be meeting at 6:45 at Fresh Choice north of the Arboretum. If you want to come and ask any more questions or just have dinner with some cool people, not limited to us.
Yeah, there's other cool people.
Great. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. And
so we do some news bits?
News bits? Yeah, we're out of callers. Hey, people, call. When the phone number goes back. But right now, look at...
When you're right, you're right. And nobody wants to call and tell you you're wrong.
Yes, they're all scared of us. What, did I get a bad face from somebody in the
No, all three lines just lit.
Oh, hey. I taunt you. Okay. We have an atheist lobbyist we have for some months. Her name is Lori Lipman Brown.
She's great.
Is she?
I like her.
Been paying attention to
her.
I
like what I've heard from her so far.
In fact, I haven't even read this story yet, but it sounded like a good thing to read. Last month, as the House prepared to pass a plan allowing Head Start recipients to make hiring decisions based on an applicant's religion, Lori Lipman Brown prepared a battle plan from her nearby basement office with her staff of 1. Brown is something of an original, the first full-time lobbyist that America's atheist community has ever stationed in the nation's capital. As such, she has become a media novelty, having been featured in the pages of USA Today and interviewed by ABC News Radio. However, I haven't yet heard her being smeared by Bill O'Reilly or Pat Robertson or any of the usual suspects.
I don't think she's raised enough of a fuss yet. This thing about Head Start is going to be the first big deal.
Yeah, so as much as we appreciate what you're doing, Lori, you haven't made it yet because people aren't telling lies about you. When you hear somebody say that Lori Lipman Brown is a child molester or something, you'll know that she's been doing good work.
They're going to have a hard time because she is a genuinely nice person. They
don't have a hard time with genuinely nice people.
She was picked because they tend to, but anyway.
Yeah. Brown, 47, describes herself as a warm, fuzzy atheist. Her way of steering people from the assumption that non-believers tend to be grim and uncharitable. Some people think that about us. But I think that a lot of people find it difficult to understand why anyone would live an ethical life if they weren't fearful of going to hell, Brown said. For those of us who don't have a deity, this is the only life we believe we have, and there's a huge responsibility on us, here and now, to make sure that we help our fellow people and leave the world better for future generations. On the job barely 3 weeks, the former Democratic Nevada state senator presents an attractive side to atheism, her supporters say, something they claim is needed when the religious right wields enormous clout in Washington and non-believers are stigmatized. She puts a face on secular America that wasn't there before, said Roy Speckard, executive director of the American Humanist Association. It's so much easier to demonize people you haven't met. I can stop there.
Yeah, I had that news bit last week, but I don't think we actually got to it. It was disturbing that this Head Start is going to be screening applicants based on their faith, which is completely unconstitutional. And
I mean, this is the problem with faith-based initiatives. We don't have there's no problem with charities being government funded where all the people who are in the charity happen to be of a particular religion. Where there's a problem is that when you specifically give money to people who say they're faith-based, then that kind of opens the door to allowing hiring discrimination, which is our big beef with it.
The other big problem with faith-based initiatives is that if you want to make sure that there's a charity group or some organization to deal with, some aspect of disaster relief, I think it's fine to encourage faith-based organizations who are willing and qualified to do that. But the criteria for determining which organization is going to get the funding should have nothing to do with what their religious beliefs are or anything else. It should be who's the most qualified, who's the most properly equipped to handle the situation. If it turns out that it's a Catholic or Christian or Buddhist or Methodist church that is the best equipped to handle the situation, fine, fund them, let them do it. Let's help people as best we can. But if you're showing preferential and favoritism towards specific faiths or specific types of faiths, which we often get into, even Justice Scalia talking about the Judeo-Christian majority, that's wrong. Let's go for what's best. I want the best person possible for every job in every situation. And I realize it's unrealistic, but when good candidates are being, sidelined, and others are being pushed forward just because of their beliefs, I have a problem with that. It happened in the Katrina relief, where there was an organization who was prepared to handle some of the disaster work, and because there was a faith-based organization that was also supposedly ready, they ended up driving evacuees another 150 miles or something, and getting there to find out that these people were completely ill-equipped to handle the situation. They had to call in the fire department and people to help. But
so go Lori Lipman Brown.
Yay!
In conclusion. And we're running out of time. We got 8 minutes left. We now have full lines, and we're going to go straight to Rebecca. Hello?
Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi. I just tuned in, so I'm not really sure what everybody's been saying, but
Okay.
I was just going to say that I'm an atheist, and I watch your show a lot, and I see that you say the topic is arguing about God, and I a lot of times I'll have people tell me, you should be a Christian because what if you die and you're wrong? And my whole thing to them is, that's what me and my mom call fire insurance. And I'm like, what I tell them is, if God is all-knowing and I were to die, he would obviously know that I was in it only because I wanted to not burn in hell. And just to me, it's like, if he is all-knowing, then he would know, you know what I mean? He would know that I'm believing in this religion only to save myself, pretty much, in the end.
Well, of course, that's
Pascal's wager.
Pascal's wager.
And there's a lot of other problems with it, too. I mean, what if believing in Jesus and it turns out that somebody else is right?
Yeah. Pascal actually had a response to that, which was basically, if you tell yourself you believe, then eventually you'll start to believe that you believe, and then you will believe. That's not exactly how he put it, but he thought that basically you could trick yourself into really truly believing. So you can force yourself
to believe in God, just like you can apparently force yourself to not be gay.
Yeah, basically. But the big problem with that, of course, is what if you live your whole life as a Christian and then it turns out that Islam is right? I mean, Muslims, they think that atheists are heathens, but they think that Christians are, are downright evil.
Well.
And I just started taking Philosophy 101, but we learned about, the secular argument, believing in God because the Bible tells you so, and believing in the Bible because God wrote it.
Right.
Kind of thing. Yeah, I'm just learning about that, so I think it's really interesting. But I really like your show a lot, and I try to catch it when I can. But thanks for having me on.
We're glad to have you as a listener. And have you ever been to our after show dinners?
No, I haven't. I think I'm kind of scared to go.
Oh.
Just not because I'm scared of you, just because I don't know anybody.
I didn't either, and that's how I ended up on the show.
Yeah, Matt just started showing up at stuff, and he was...
They couldn't get rid of me.
He became a Yeah, well, that was it.
All right, well, thank you.
Okay,
thanks a lot.
Well, bye.
Thanks, bye.
And those after-show dinners will be 6:45, Fresh Choice, today, October 16th, 2005, if anyone is interested in their atheist or atheist-friendly. We've got time for a couple of more calls in our last 5 minutes, and the first one is going to be Greg.
How you doing? This is a question for Matt. What finally... I'm sorry, just to come out and ask a question, but because there's a little bit of time, but what was your final... cut it all off. What did you? Because you said you were a Baptist, correct?
Yeah, for years.
What did you?
I don't know that.
Ask you or someone?
I don't know that I can identify the straw that broke the camel's back or a specific instant in time. After high school, and I was extremely religious in my youth. I went in the Navy for 8 years. When I got out of the Navy, I began studying again because I had originally wanted to go to seminary and get into the ministry. And after the Navy, I started studying again. And in the process of studying, I would come across problems and confusions and contradictions, and I would go seeking help from either my uncle, who used to be a missionary, and others. And as I began to examine the quality of the answers, for instance, Josh McDowell's book, Evidence That Demands a Verdict. If you're already a Christian and you're just having doubts and you read that book, wow, that answers all your questions, because it doesn't do anything to challenge your preconceptions. It's when you actually look into the validity of his arguments and the claims that are made in there, which is what I actually started doing. And it was the writings of, there's a guy out of St. Louis from the St. Louis Rationalist Association or Society, Ken Harding, who had written some good articles that kind of got me started. I'd been a longtime fan of James Randi, which directed me to stuff by Carl Sagan, but I'd say the most influential was probably Colonel Robert Ingersoll, who'd been dead a century before I ever read any of his work. He has some of the most enjoyable and insightful essays on the Bible and belief and religion and Christianity and just gave me an entirely different perspective. And this was, I'm talking about a period of time for like 2.5, 3 years where I was reading ridiculous amounts. I was unemployed for a while and would sit at home often and just read all day long philosophical books. I learned more about the Bible in the process of deciding that I didn't believe in it anymore than I had in any of the pre-seminary training. Okay. So I can't identify a point, but it was a long time.
All right. Well, thank you for your call. Bye.
Thanks.
Okay. And thank you for your call, too. Okay, down to 2.5 minutes, so this will obviously be the last call, I think. And this is Ed.
Hello.
Hey, Ed.
Hey, I missed the first part of your show, and I wondered if you guys had had anything in the news on the Amish thing with the polio breakout. Well, it's kind of a scary kind of deal, but I think I heard it yesterday on the news where they're afraid that they're going to have some kind of major breakout with polio with the Amish people. I forget where it is, but they've had a couple of cases now, and it's due to their religious beliefs.
Yeah, they're not the only ones either. That I mean, do Christian Scientists allow polio vaccinations now?
I don't know any Christian scientists, so I only know about their beliefs in principle, and they don't believe in doctors.
Yeah, although they make exceptions for broken bones, and I know, is it Mary Baker Eddy? Is that the founder? She started making exceptions anytime she needed anything. If she needed glasses, all of a sudden glasses were allowed. So I don't know. In vaccinations, they might. To me, it seems that when you're talking about children, it's time. That may be one of the areas where the government steps in and says,
what I was wondering.
We respect your religious belief, but for the betterment of society, especially with infectious diseases, we're going to, every kid who goes to school is going to have those vaccinations regardless of what you believe.
Yeah, social contract in that. I mean, we try to be, our society tries to be respectful of your beliefs to a point, but there's some stuff you just can't do. And if your religion involves, like, a human sacrifice, for instance, sorry, we're going to discriminate against your religion. And I guess this is kind of the same situation.
I just wondered if you heard anything about that. I heard something about it, I think last night, a little blurb on the news about it. But
no, I hadn't, but I'll look into it.
Okay.
I hadn't either.
All right.
But
thanks.
Thank you for calling. And that's it. No time for one more call, and 25 seconds to pad. Oh, the pressure. Thanks for watching, everybody. And thanks to our great crew who have just gone off the screen, and for our live studio audience. And we'll hopefully see a lot of you guys at Fresh Choice in 45 minutes from now, north of the Arboretum. And that's our show. Watch it next week, and goodbye. Peace.